Why did the room fall quiet the moment she walked in, like something ancient had shifted beneath the noise? Hazel Reed felt it before she saw it, that subtle tightening in the air, the way voices lowered half a second too late, the instinct that never left her, no matter how long she tried to bury it. She paused just inside the bar's doorway, letting her eyes adjust, letting her breath slow. Not because she was afraid, because she had learned, painfully, that awareness was survival. The anchor was loud tonight. Friday crowd, Marines, contractors, a few locals pretending not to notice the uniforms. Laughter bounced off the walls, glasses clinked, someone argued about sports near the back. Normal noise, normal life. The kind she'd worked hard to earn. Hazel stepped behind the bar and tied her apron. Her movements were unremarkable by design. Small, efficient, forgettable. She wanted to be forgettable. She had learned the cost of being noticed. 5 Marines took the stools at the counter almost immediately. Loud, confident, the kind of men who filled space without asking permission. Their presence shifted the balance of the room, not because they were dangerous, but because they expected the world to bend slightly when they entered it. Hazel greeted them with a nod, neutral, professional. One of them, broad shoulders, loud voice, easy grin sharpened by arrogance, leaned forward and snapped his fingers. "Beer cold and make it quick." She didn't flinch, didn't rush either. She reached for a towel, wiped the counter where condensation had pooled, folded the cloth carefully. Too carefully, maybe. Old habits surfaced when she was tired. The Marine laughed. "You always this slow, or is tonight special?" A few chuckles followed, not cruel, not yet, just careless. Hazel set the towel down and met his eyes for the first time. Calm, empty, measuring. "I'll be right with you," she said. The words were polite, her tone flat, no challenge, no apology. That was when the mocking started. Questions thrown like darts, comments disguised as jokes, a test she hadn't signed up for. She'd seen this pattern before, men performing for each other, trying to establish rank in a space that didn't belong to them. She let it wash over her, ignored the heat rising in her chest, focused on the mechanics of the bar. Bottles, glasses, orders, control what you can control. But when one of them leaned too close, when a hand landed on her shoulder with the casual ownership of someone who had never been told no, something inside her shifted. Not anger. Memory. Her body reacted before her mind could stop it. Fingers closed around his wrist, pressure applied, not enough to hurt, just enough to make a point. "Please don't touch me," she said quietly. The room felt different after that, like a breath held too long. The Marine pulled back, surprised, embarrassed. His pride flared, and with it came something sharper. "You got a lot of attitude for a bartender." Hazel released him and turned away, heart steady, hands calm. She had learned how to swallow worse than words, learned how to keep going when walking away wasn't an option. But she also knew something was coming, the kind of escalation that fed on ego and alcohol. She didn't know yet that the night was already past the point of no return. Across the room, an older man watched her carefully. He didn't laugh, didn't speak. His eyes tracked her movement with the recognition of someone who had seen the same posture in mirrors long ago. Hazel felt his gaze and forced herself to relax her shoulders. Be normal, she reminded herself. Just for tonight. Behind her, the Marines continued their commentary. About training, about toughness, about who deserved respect and who didn't. One of them scoffed at special operations, dismissed them as myths inflated by movies and ego. Hazel poured a beer and slid it across the counter with controlled precision. She didn't correct him. Not yet. Because there was something they didn't know. Something she had learned the hard way. That the loudest people in the room rarely carried the heaviest weight. And that dignity didn't need to announce itself. It waited. And when the moment came, it acted. Why did she move before anyone else even realized something was wrong? The sound came first. Not a shout, not a crash, just the wrong kind of silence, the kind that arrives a fraction of a second before chaos. Hazel was mid-pour when it hit her, an instinctive pull low in her chest, sharp and undeniable. Her head turned before the glass was even set down. Someone had collapsed. For most people it registered as confusion, a chair scraping, a glass shattering, a murmur rising into alarm. For Hazel it was pattern recognition, years of conditioning snapping into place without permission. She was already moving. She vaulted the bar without thinking, hands planted, body clearing the wood in a single smooth motion. It wasn't fast in a flashy way. It was efficient, purposeful, the way someone moved when time mattered and hesitation killed. By the time anyone said his name, Hazel was already on the floor beside him. Oscar, the older man who always sat alone, the one who never drank alcohol anymore, the one who watched more than he spoke. His body had gone rigid, muscles locked, eyes unfocused. Hazel turned him gently onto his side, one hand supporting his head, the other checking his airway. Calm voice, steady hands. "Oscar, you're okay. I've got you." Her voice cut through the noise like an anchor. Someone shouted for help. Someone else froze. A chair scraped backward. Panic tried to take the room. Hazel didn't let it. She counted silently. Seconds mattered. Breathing, pulse. She tracked it all without looking at a watch, without needing one. Her mind narrowed to the task, everything else falling away. A man rushed forward, Navy corpsman. She clocked it instantly from the way he moved, the way he knelt, the way his hands hovered, not taking over but waiting. "Doc," he said, "what do you need?" She didn't look up. "Ambulance, seizure, he's postictal, airways clear, stay with me." The words weren't rehearsed, they were reflex. The room had gone quiet again, but this time it wasn't mockery or curiosity. It was awe mixed with confusion. The Marines at the bar stared, beer forgotten in their hands. That wasn't bartender behavior. Hazel stayed with Oscar until the paramedics arrived, briefing them cleanly, precisely, without drama. When they lifted him onto the gurney, he caught her hand with surprising strength. "Thank you," he whispered. She squeezed back once. "You're not alone." When it was over, Hazel washed her hands behind the bar, scrubbing like she always did after emergencies. Slow, methodical, controlled, but her reflection in the mirror betrayed her, jaw tight, eyes distant, shoulders carrying more than the moment required. The Marines didn't joke anymore. One of them finally spoke, softer this time. "Where'd you learn that?" Hazel didn't meet his eyes. "Training." "What kind of training?" She paused just long enough to matter. Enough. That answer unsettled them more than any explanation could have. The dynamic had shifted. The power they thought they held had evaporated, replaced by something they didn't understand. They weren't being challenged. They were being evaluated, and the realization made them uncomfortable. One of them tried to recover, laughed too loudly. "Guess we underestimated you." Hazel wiped the counter. "Happens." But the truth was already leaking through the cracks. The way she stood, balanced, aware. The way her eyes tracked exits without seeming to. The way her breathing slowed instead of spiking after adrenaline. The way her hands bore faint scars that didn't belong to bar work. People noticed now. A man near the window, off-duty but unmistakably military, had gone still. He watched Hazel the way officers watch terrain before a firefight, not with suspicion, with recognition. When Hazel glanced up and met his gaze, something passed between them. Respect, caution, a silent agreement not to escalate what didn't need escalation. But the Marines weren't done. Alcohol and pride are dangerous companions. One of them slid a coin across the bar, heavy, intentional. "Challenge coin," he said. "You know the rules." Hazel looked at it. Her face gave nothing away, but inside something tightened. That wasn't a souvenir. That wasn't casual. "Yes," she said, "I know the rules." "Then show us yours." The bar seemed to hold its breath. Hazel didn't move, didn't reach for her pocket, didn't look away. "I'm working," she said, "and I don't play games on shift." The Marine smiled, sharp and satisfied. Convenient. What he wanted wasn't proof. It was dominance, a win in front of his friends. Hazel knew that game. She played it in harsher places with higher stakes, and she'd learned when to disengage. But he wasn't finished. "What have you done?" he asked. "I mean really done, served drinks, memorized some jargon." The insult landed harder than he intended. Hazel's hand stilled on the glass. She didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was even, almost gentle. "Service doesn't need an audience." Something in her tone made a few heads turn, made a few spines straighten. "You calling me fake?" the Marine shot back. Hazel finally looked at him, really looked, saw the insecurity behind the bravado, the need to be seen as significant. "I'm saying," she replied, "that the people who have carried the most usually don't talk about it." Silence followed, heavy, uncomfortable. Then the door opened. 5 men entered, civilian clothes, military presence. The room felt it immediately, the way conversations dropped, the way space subtly rearranged around them. They scanned the bar automatically, exits, corners, faces. Then the lead man saw Hazel. He stopped. Not abruptly, just decisively, like the world had given him a data point he hadn't expected. Hazel felt it before she heard him. "Lieutenant." Her breath caught. That name hadn't belonged to her in a long time. Every muscle in her body remembered what her mind had tried to forget. Spine straightening, shoulders squaring, weight settling evenly over her feet. She didn't answer. The man stepped closer, slower now. "Hazel, it's me." Recognition hit like a wave she hadn't braced for. Memory, loss, relief tangled together. "Hawk," she said quietly. The Marines at the bar stared, confusion turning to disbelief. "Permission to approach, ma'am," the man said. "Ma'am." That single word detonated everything. Hazel nodded once. The 5 men shifted, unconsciously falling into formation, not for show, for respect. And for the first time that night, Hazel let herself stand the way she truly was. Not a bartender, not a curiosity, but someone who had earned every ounce of silence now filling the room. Sometimes dignity doesn't shout. It waits until the world is finally ready to listen. Why did every conversation die the moment one of the men near the door quietly said, "That can't be her"? Hazel felt the weight of the room before she understood why. Not the loud kind of attention, the kind that buzzed and pointed, but the heavy, reverent kind. The kind that came when people realized they were standing too close to something they didn't fully understand. Hawk hadn't taken his eyes off her. Neither had the men behind him. They weren't starring in disbelief. They were confirming reality. "You disappeared," Hawk said. His voice carried no accusation, just fact. No trail, no noise. Hazel reached for a glass, then stopped herself. Her hands were steady, but her chest was. That was the point. The Marines shifted on their stools. One of them glanced at the challenge coin still lying on the counter, suddenly unsure whether to touch it or pretend it had never existed. Hawk glanced at the coin, then back to Hazel. A corner of his mouth twitched, not amusement, recognition. Figures. She sighed, quiet, controlled. "You shouldn't be here." He nodded. "We weren't planning to be." The men with him spread out without instruction. One near the door, one near the windows, 2 taking seats with clear sightlines. The room adjusted around them instinctively. Even civilians sensed it. This wasn't a group that occupied space accidentally. Hazel leaned against the counter, finally allowing herself to rest her weight. What's wrong? Hawk hesitated. That told her everything. You don't ask unless something already is, she said. He met her eyes. We lost contact with a team in the north. ISR went dark, commands scrambling but the pictures incomplete. Hazel exhaled through her nose. Old anger stirred, not at him, at the pattern, at how often the same stories repeated with different names. And you thought of me, she said. We didn't at first, Hawk admitted. But then someone mentioned a ghost analyst who used to see things before they happened. Hazel looked away. The bar's hum returned at the edges of her hearing, distant and unimportant. I don't do that anymore. I know, Hawk said, but they do. She closed her eyes briefly. The images came anyway. Maps, routes, variables, the quiet math of survival. Where, she asked. Hawk slid a folded paper across the counter. Not a tablet, not a phone, paper because he knew. Hazel unfolded it slowly. Coordinates, terrain notes. Handwritten annotations she recognized instantly hers, old, from another life. Her jaw tightened. You kept my files, she said. We kept what saved lives. She studied the map, saw the flaw immediately. A route that looked safe but wasn't. A ridge that funneled sound. A pattern of enemy movement that didn't match doctrine but matched desperation. They're alive, she said, for now. Hawk's shoulders eased a fraction. How do you know? She tapped the map once, because if they weren't, they'd have been used already. One of the Marines let out a quiet breath. Used how? Hazel looked up at him. Her gaze wasn't unkind, just tired. As a message. Silence followed. Hawk watched her carefully. We're wheels up in 6 hours. Hazel folded the paper again, neat, precise. You don't have 6 hours. He nodded. That's what I was afraid you'd say. The Marines at the bar had gone completely still now. One of them finally stood, cleared his throat. Ma'am. Hazel turned to him, not sharply, just fully. Yes. He swallowed. We were out of line. She studied his face, saw sincerity battling embarrassment, pride learning humility in real time. Probably, she said, but that's not why you're uncomfortable. He hesitated. No. You're uncomfortable, she continued, because you thought strength was loud, and now you're realizing it is. She let that sit, not as a lesson, as an observation. Hawk checked his watch. Hazel, if you come with us. I'm not going with you, she said immediately. He didn't argue, he knew better. But I'll help, she added, from here. One of his men frowned. With respect, ma'am, remote support. Hazel looked at him. Kept your last 3 missions from going sideways. The man closed his mouth. Hazel spread the map out again, motioning Hawk closer. Their heads bent together, voices low. She traced routes with her finger, rerouted extractions, adjusted timing windows by minutes that meant everything. Her mind slipped into the work like it had never left. Fear quieted, regret faded. There was only problem-solving now, only purpose. As she spoke, Hawk watched her, not as the woman behind the bar, but as the operator he remembered. The one who never raised her voice. The one who carried losses quietly and victories even quieter. You always did this, he murmured, took the weight so others could move. Hazel paused. The words landed deeper than she expected. That's why I stopped, she said. Hawk didn't push. He didn't need to. When the plan was done, Hazel leaned back, suddenly exhausted. The bar felt too small, too full of echoes. You should go, she said, before I change my mind. Hawk folded the map carefully. You sure? No, she replied honestly, but certainty overrated. He extended his hand. She hesitated only a second before taking it. His grip was firm, familiar. Good to have you back, he said. Hazel released him gently. I'm not back. He smiled. We'll see. As they moved toward the door, the Marine stepped aside without thinking. One of them snapped to attention before he realized what he was doing. The others followed, instinct overpowering pride. Hazel noticed, pretended she didn't. When the door closed behind them, the bar slowly exhaled. Conversations resumed in whispers. Glasses clinked again. Hazel stood alone behind the counter, staring at the space they'd occupied. Her heart ached, not from fear, but from hope she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. Sometimes redemption doesn't arrive as forgiveness. Sometimes it arrives as a second chance to choose differently. Why did she wake up already counting seconds, exits, mistakes that hadn't happened yet? Hazel lay still in the dark, staring at the ceiling as the city breathed around her. Sirens far away, a truck downshifting somewhere, the quiet hum of a refrigerator she'd been meaning to replace for years. Normal sounds, civilian sounds. Her mind didn't care. It replayed the map, the ridge, the timing window Hawk would try to stretch even though he shouldn't, the weather front moving faster than predicted. She built the plan tight on purpose, no room for ego, no space for improvisation that got people killed. She rolled onto her side and checked the phone. No messages. That was good. It meant they were still moving. Sleep didn't come back. By dawn, she was at the small desk by the window, coffee untouched, laptop open, not connected to anything classified. She didn't need it to be. She worked from memory now, from pattern, from a lifetime of seeing what others missed because they wanted the story to be simpler than it was. She wrote everything down anyway. Not orders, questions. What if the enemy wasn't holding the team where intelligence suggested, but herded them? What if the silence wasn't caution, but confidence? What if the terrain itself was the weapon? She circled the ridge again, drew arrows, then crossed them out. Hazel leaned back and closed her eyes. The memories came uninvited, not explosions, not gunfire, faces, voices, people who had trusted her calculations, people who hadn't come home. She, told herself leaving, was the only way to stop adding names to that list. The phone buzzed. One message, one word. Moving. She exhaled, slow and controlled. Hours passed like that, waiting without waiting. Every minute stretched thin. She paced the apartment, then forced herself to sit. She knew better than to burn energy she might need later. Another message. Contact made. Her fingers tightened around the phone. She pictured Hawk's face, the way he always paused half a second longer than everyone else before committing. That pause had saved lives. It had also haunted him. She typed back carefully. Confirm pattern, don't chase. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, reappeared. Confirmed they're baiting. Of course they were. Hazel stood, heart accelerating now. This was the moment plans either held or broke. She stared out the window, grounding herself. Streetlight, cracked pavement, a stray cat darting between cars. The world kept moving, indifferent to the thin line her people were walking halfway across it. The phone rang. Hawk didn't waste time. You were right. She closed her eyes. Tell me. They let us see the team, he said, just long enough. Then they pulled back toward the ridge. Hazel felt the familiar weight settle on her chest, the one she carried long before she ever wore a uniform. They want you compressed, predictable. And we're not going, Hawk said. That surprised her, in a good way. But command's pushing, he added quietly. They want closure. Hazel's jaw tightened. Closure gets people killed. Silence stretched between them, the kind filled with static and unspoken pressure. I need you, Hawk said finally, not as an order, as a truth. Hazel leaned against the wall, the cool plaster steadying her. This was the line she'd sworn not to cross again. Direct involvement, the moment where distance vanished and responsibility snapped back into place. She thought of Oscar, of the bar, of the Marines standing at attention without understanding why. She thought of all the times she'd stayed quiet while the world assumed the wrong thing about her, and how sometimes silence wasn't humility, it was avoidance. "Patch me in," she said. The connection came alive in her ear, voices overlapping, controlled chaos. She listened, absorbing the rhythm, the stress points, the fear no one admitted out loud. Hazel spoke once, calm, clear. "Stop advancing," she said. "Now." There was hesitation, then compliance. She walked them through it slowly, repositioning, letting the enemy overcommit, using patience as a weapon. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't heroic, it was restraint applied at exactly the right moment. Minutes passed, then more. A voice broke through, strained but steady. "We've got them." Hazel sagged against the wall, breath leaving her in a rush she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "Team recovered?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." "Ma'am." The word didn't sting this time, it felt earned and heavy. The line went quiet again, not dead, just focused elsewhere. Hazel slid down until she was sitting on the floor back against the wall, phone still in her hand. Her body trembled now that it was safe to do so. Not fear, release. An hour later, Hawk called back. "They're on their way home," he said. Exhaustion edged every syllable. "All of them." Hazel smiled faintly, eyes wet. "Good." There was a pause, then softer, "You saved them." She shook her head even though he couldn't see it. "They saved each other. I just reminded you not to rush." "That's not all you did." Hazel closed her eyes. "That's enough." When the call ended, the apartment felt too quiet, too small for what had just happened. She stood and went to the window again, watching the city wake up fully now. She knew something had shifted, inside her, outside her. You could walk away from a role, but not always from responsibility. And sometimes, redemption wasn't about returning to who you were. It was about choosing, deliberately, who you would be next. Hazel didn't know what came after this. But for the first time in a long while, she wasn't afraid to find out. Sometimes strength is knowing when to step forward again. Not for glory, but because silence would cost too much. Why did the hardest part begin only after the mission was over? Hazel thought relief would feel louder, like a release valve snapping open, like something breaking cleanly and letting the pressure escape. Instead, it came quietly, almost politely, a soft settling of weight that revealed how much she'd been carrying without admitting it. She went back to the bar that evening. Same apron, same counter, same smell of citrus cleaner and old wood. The anchor didn't know anything about ridgelines or baited roots or men who'd come home because someone had said stop at the right moment. And that was the problem. The Marines were already there. Not the same posture this time. No sprawled confidence. No performative laughter. They stood when she approached, not all at once, not dramatically, but instinctively, like their bodies had decided something before their pride could argue. Hazel stopped short. "You don't have to do that." One of them, the one who'd first mocked her, cleared his throat. "We know." They stayed standing anyway. She exhaled slowly and moved behind the bar. Her hands found familiar tasks, wiping, pouring, grounding herself in repetition. But she felt it now, the distance, the way people watched without starring, the way conversations bent around her presence instead of pushing against it. That kind of attention was dangerous. It made expectations grow. She hated expectations. A woman at the far end of the bar caught Hazel's eye. Civilian, early 30s, wedding ring twisted nervously around her finger. "My husband's deployed," the woman said suddenly, voice trembling just enough to be honest. I heard you helped bring a team back." Hazel stilled. The room went quiet again, but this time it wasn't awe or mockery. It was hope, fragile, exposed. Hazel walked down the bar and set a glass of water in front of the woman, sat across from her, meeting her eyes directly. "I help people make careful choices," she said. That's all. The woman nodded, tears gathering. That's more than nothing. Hazel didn't correct her. Later, when the bar thinned out and the night slowed, Hawk returned. No entourage this time, just him. He didn't sit at the bar. He stood beside it, hands in his jacket pockets, like a man unsure whether he was allowed to take up space. "You didn't have to come back here," he said. Hazel glanced around. "Someone has to close." "That's not what I meant." She leaned against the counter, studying him. He looked older than he had the night before, not weaker, just worn by relief and what-ifs. "What do you want, Hawk?" He hesitated, then, "They're asking questions." She nodded. "They always do. They want you back, not like before. Different role, advisory, strategic oversight, quiet." Hazel laughed softly, not amused. "Quiet doesn't stay quiet." "No," he admitted, "but it might stay honest." She turned away, wiping down a section of counter that didn't need wiping. This was the moment she'd known was coming. The cost of being seen. "I didn't leave because I failed," she said. "I left because I succeeded too often, and every success came with a bill." Hawk leaned closer. "You paid more than your share." "That doesn't mean I want to keep paying." Silence stretched between them, heavy but not hostile. "Hazel," he said finally, "what if the point isn't to stop carrying weight, but to choose which weight matters?" She closed her eyes. She saw the ridge again, the pause before the decision. The moment restraint had saved lives, not force, not brilliance, just care. "I don't trust institutions," she said quietly. "They forget the human cost once the numbers look good." "Then help them remember," Hawk replied. She looked at him, really looked, saw the man who'd followed her calls even when they went against momentum, the man who hadn't pressured her until it mattered. "You'd lose influence backing me," she said. "I know. You'd make enemies." "I already have." Hazel smiled faintly. "You haven't changed." "Neither have you," he said gently. "You just learned how to disappear." That night after Hawk left, Hazel locked up alone, turned off the lights, stood in the quiet, listening to the building settle. She thought about the Marines standing without being told, about the woman twisting her ring, about the men who'd come home because someone had been willing to stay calm when everyone else rushed. She also thought about herself, about how tired she was of hiding in plain sight, about how silence had protected her, but also isolated her. At home, she pulled a small box from the back of a closet, opened it for the first time in years. Inside, a folded flag, a challenge coin she'd never shown anyone, a photograph of a younger version of herself, eyes fierce, shoulders squared, standing among people who trusted her completely. She sat on the floor and let herself cry, not from pain, from honesty. The next morning, she sent Hawk a single message. "Conditions." The reply came almost immediately. "Name them." Hazel stared at the screen, then typed. "Transparency, veto power, and the freedom to walk away if it stops being about people." 3 dots, then. "Done." She set the phone down and breathed. This wasn't a return to who she had been. It was a step toward who she was willing to be now. Sometimes redemption isn't loud or triumphant. Sometimes it's the quiet courage to re-enter the fight on your own terms. Why did the room go silent before she ever said a word? Hazel stood just inside the doorway, hands loosely at her sides, feeling the familiar weight of eyes without meeting any of them. The briefing room was larger than the bar, colder, stripped of anything that pretended to be comfortable. Screens glowed. Maps waited. People leaned forward without realizing they were doing it. She hadn't worn a uniform. That had been intentional. No rank on her shoulders. No insignia to invite shortcuts or assumptions. Just neutral clothes and a presence that didn't ask permission to exist. Hawk watched her from the far end of the table. He didn't introduce her. He didn't need to. Everyone in the room already knew why they were quiet. Hazel took a breath, not to steady herself, but to mark the moment, the line between who she had been hiding as and who she was choosing to be now. "Before we start," she said calmly, "I want to be clear about something." She paused, let the room lean in. "I'm not here to make you faster or braver or more aggressive." Her voice was steady, unforced. "I'm here to help you come home." No one interrupted. She stepped forward and rested her hands lightly on the table. The map beneath them showed terrain she'd memorized years ago. She didn't look at it yet. "Everyone in this room is capable," she continued. "You wouldn't be here if you weren't, but capability is what saves lives. Judgment does. And judgment requires patience, especially when pressure tells you to rush." A few people shifted, not defensively, thoughtfully. Hazel finally looked up, met their eyes one by one, not challenging, human. "I will tell you when I don't know," she said. "And when I do, I expect you to listen, not because of who I was, but because of what the situation demands." She straightened. "If that's a problem, say it now." No one spoke. Hawk exhaled quietly, almost smiling. The work began after that. Not dramatic, not cinematic, long hours, careful language, hard questions that didn't always have clean answers. Hazel listened more than she spoke. When she did speak, it was precise, measured, grounded in concern, not ego. She caught mistakes early, not with criticism, but with redirection. She asked why instead of telling people they were wrong. She changed the temperature of the room without raising her voice. And slowly, almost invisibly, things shifted. Plans became leaner, risk assessments more honest. The bravado thinned, replaced by something sturdier: trust, not blind trust, earned trust. Weeks passed. Hazel still worked nights at the bar. That hadn't changed. Some nights Marines came in and nodded to her. Some nights they didn't say a word, just sat a little straighter. She preferred the quiet ones. Oscar returned one evening, moving slower now, leaning on a cane. Hazel poured him water before he asked. "Still watching the room?" he teased gently. She smiled. "Old habits." He studied her. "You look lighter." Hazel considered that. "I stopped pretending I didn't care." Oscar nodded. "That'll do it." One night near closing, a young woman hesitated by the bar. Early 20s, nervous, new uniform not yet broken in. "Ma'am," she asked softly. Hazel looked up. "Yes." "I just wanted to say, seeing you here, seeing how people listen to you without you asking them to, it matters." Hazel felt something warm and unexpected settle in her chest. "Be careful what you carry," Hazel replied, "but don't be afraid to carry something." The woman nodded, eyes bright. "I won't forget." Neither did Hazel. Months later, another mission ended quietly. No headlines, no speeches, just people coming home. Hazel watched the feed from a small office this time, hands folded, heart steady. When the confirmation came through, mission complete, 0 losses, she didn't cheer. She closed her eyes and let herself rest. Hawk found her afterward, leaning against the hallway wall. "You know," he said, "they listen to you more than they ever listened to me." Hazel smiled faintly. "That's because I don't need them to." He laughed softly. "Fair." They stood in silence for a moment. "You ever miss disappearing?" he asked. Hazel thought about the bar, the quiet nights, the safety of anonymity. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but I don't miss feeling useless." Hawk nodded. "You were never that." "I know," she said. "I just needed to believe it again." That evening, Hazel locked up the bar one last time, not with sadness, with gratitude. The anchor had given her space when she needed it, a place to breathe, to remember who she was without obligation. She left the keys on the counter for the owner, wrote a simple note. "Thank you for the quiet." Outside, the air was cool, the city hummed, life moved forward without ceremony. Hazel walked down the street without looking back. She didn't know how long this chapter would last. She knew better than to promise permanence. But she also knew this. She was done hiding her strength to make others comfortable. She would speak when it mattered, stay silent when that mattered more, and carry responsibility with care, not because she was fearless but because she understood the cost of looking away. Somewhere behind her, a group of men and women planned carefully instead of rushing. Somewhere else, families slept a little easier without knowing why. Hazel didn't need them to know. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It doesn't announce itself or demand recognition. Sometimes dignity simply acts and lets the world catch up in its own time.